Oh, you want it farther back?
Sorry.
I like it
I'm
up
gonna
like
be like
this.
this.
Yeah.
You ready?
I am.
What's up, guys? My name is Mikko Hytönen, and this is Jokes and More podcast, baby. A show where we talk about jiu-jitsu, life, and everything in between. We are capturing the magic moment after a hard jiu-jitsu training. Today, I'm joined by Iron Man, 78-year-old black belt, William Mitchell. Welcome.
Mikko, brother. A pleasure. Thank you so
for
much.
Coming.
No, this is great.
How's your week been so far?
Yeah, so far good. Training, back to training hard again. Everything's fine. My Achilles is mending. But I don't think there's anybody in jiu-jitsu who goes through long periods of time without something bothering them. A knee, an ankle.
I agree, totally. It's the truth, but it's unpleasant truth. But there is always, injuries and pain involved with this process. When did you start at jiu-jitsu? What age?
I was very young when I started. I was 64 years old.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Where was your first training? What was the academy?
Yes, I started in a place called Destin, Florida.
Yeah.
It was a Gracie University affiliate. And I remember walking in one day and meeting the instructor, the owner of the academy. His name is Carlos Diaz, and he's a very dear, a close friend of mine. And I said, listen, I've had some issues in the past. I had this defibrillator put in my chest. I have titanium rods in my back, but I used to be a martial artist, and I'd like to be a martial artist again. And he said, welcome. A lot of guys would have said, no thanks, I want nothing to do with you. But he said, welcome.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And there it started. Never looked back.
Never looked back.
Since that day, let's walk through a little bit where you have been training. You have been traveling a lot, and you have been training with a lot of different guys around the world. Walk me through a little bit.
Well, actually, I stayed in Destin, Florida.
Okay.
By the way, it's a beautiful place with magnificent beaches. But I stayed there for 7.5 years training with Carlos. Now, I did go out to Torrance, California, to Gracie University headquarters a couple of times, and I did go to seminars. Pedro Sauer seminars, for example. And then after those 7.5 years, my wife and I and our dog moved to Barcelona, Spain. And we've been in Spain now for the past 6.5 years, actually. So I trained in Barcelona with another Gracie, Robin Gracie, the youngest son of Elio. And then from there, after 2 years in Barcelona, moved down and trained at a Gracie Baja gym with Demis Donorio. Demis was a European champion in his age group. I think he won a couple of tournaments while I trained with him. This was just after the COVID pandemic. And it was actually the first time that I learned that there was points involved in jiu-jitsu. Up until that time, it had all been, in my mind, self-defense. Someone had told me, as a matter of fact, it was Carlos Diaz. He said that Elio and Carlos disagreed about whether jiu-jitsu was a sport or a martial art. And Elio told Carlos, and this is just hearsay, that Brazil already had a sport. It was called football, and they didn't need another one, so that he was going to teach a martial art. And I think that's where the difference is as far as the Gracie roots are concerned. One side teaches self-defense, the other side teaches points, the sport aspect of it. And I know that scramble is involved a lot in the points aspect of it.
Yeah. Have you competed?
I have never competed in jiu-jitsu.
Okay. What is your, of course, is there masters in 78-year-olds? What is the category? Master?
I think the last one is 60 years old, correct?
But you would do it. You could do it. You are in a good shape in your age. You're still rolling.
Yeah.
Would you do it if there would be like a perfect setup, like, okay, it's close to you and...
Yeah, I probably would, just to see what it would be like. Yeah. I mean, I've competed a lot in my life, just not in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to be, still am, a runner.
Yeah.
and triathlons. I've competed in hundreds of road races and dozens of triathlons. I want to say 2 Ironmen, but I would be lying to you. It was really 1 Ironman and 7/8. I remember running in, this was in Arizona, it was 36 or 37 degrees centigrade outside, and I had 2 flat tires on the bike. And I was praying for a 3rd flat tire because then it would give me an excuse to drop out of the race. I was having a miserable day. And I remember getting into an aid station, and a friend of mine who I trained with was also in that aid station where you get something to drink, etc. They give you chicken broth or Diet Coke, whatever you want, gels. And he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Jimmy, I'm having a bad day." And he said to me, "Fuck it, you already got your tattoo." It was my 2nd Ironman. And I said, no, I'm going to keep going. And he said, "But you got that heart thing." And one of the aid workers heard that and said, "Wait a minute, what heart thing?" Because I had had 6 bypasses done a couple of years prior to that. And as soon as the aid worker said that to me, I got up and started running again, because I knew he was going to pull me off. But when you compete, you wear a number.
Yeah.
And they called ahead, and at the next aid station, they pulled me in about 3 kilometers down the road. I think I was at the 18th mile of the 26-mile course. And he pulled me over, one of the aid workers, and said, "What's your name?" I said, "I'm William Mitchell." And he said, "How old are you?" And I couldn't remember how old I was. I had to look down at, they write in magic marker on your legs, on your calf, how old you are.
Why is that?
Because they know what age group you're competing in.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so I had to look down at my calf. I said, "Oh, I'm 59 years old." And he said, "Where do you live?" And I couldn't remember where I lived. So he said, "That's it, it's over for you." And they gave me 2 bottles of saline. I was just severely dehydrated. And that's what happened. In the Arizona sun, you don't realize how much you're sweating because it dries so quickly on you. So you're not forming puddles of water on your bike. And so it was no big deal. I mean, I was okay quickly.
When did you started doing this Ironmans? And let's go through because you're a lifelong athlete. You have been doing sports all your life, yeah?
All my life.
Let's start. Let's dive in. Your childhood. What was the first? What sport did you start at? You was born in Boston.
Well, actually, Connecticut.
Connecticut,
which is,
yeah. So what age you started to do any kind of sports, and what was the sports?
It was running, and I was about 11 years old. My uncle, who was only 3 years older than me, started running in high school. And so he got me interested in it. And he lived in the next town over from me. So when I got into high school when I was 13, I started school 1 year earlier than most people. I started when I was 5 in 1st grade. So when I was 13, I actually started running in cross country and track and field. I went to college with a track scholarship, which I quickly lost after I fell asleep reading Crime and Punishment, of all things, by Dostoevsky. If you've ever read it, you know how boring it is. But I fell asleep and arrived to the meet late. So I stopped running for about 2 or 3 years. And then, of course, when I graduated from college, then came Vietnam. So you had to stay in shape in Vietnam. I think, you know. And then after Vietnam, I became a federal narcotics agent.
How old were you when you were recruited? And let's talk a little bit about that career. How long did you stay in the military? And you went to Vietnam, and how long you stayed there? And probably hard stuff. Do you still, does it, bother you what happened?
No, do I have any PTSD from Vietnam? No, I don't. And actually, I was there towards the end of the war. I was there 70, 71. And most Americans were pulling out of Vietnam. and they were only sending in advisors. So we would go out, every other night we would go out on ambushes with Vietnamese soldiers, and at least once a week we would go on missions. And so really we were the last Americans in 2 corps. Vietnam was divided into 4 corps, and so we were one of the 2 middle corps, Phu Yen province, and we would go out with Vietnamese and try to make contact with Viet Cong or with what we called NVA, North Vietnamese Army. So I spent 10 months and 23 days. Not that anybody was counting, but I know exactly how long I was there. And then, you know, I came home, and that was it. The only thing that scared me when I got home, I think the first night sleeping, the phone rang, and I had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
You know, I got out of bed like, what the hell was that? And then I realized, but I have no PTSD or any problems, despite the fact that there were numerous.
How old you were when you went to Vietnam?
I was, 24, 23, 24.
You were in great shape when you went there because you had been running. You were,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, I was in great shape, and I even ran while I was in Vietnam.
That's some.
We lived in what they call Quonset huts, little huts with metal roofs on them. But we had a metallic airfield, an airfield built out of metal. And it was almost like running on a frying pan. It was about 1.5 kilometers long so that the planes could come in. And in the noonday sun, it had to be 40 degrees out there. But yeah, and plus we had a beach nearby, and I ran on the beach. One of the majors that I had competed for the U.S. Olympic team in biathlon. Excellent shooter and a great runner. Can't remember his name right now. But no, Vietnam was just part of my life. Made me a better person.
Okay. Do you still have, you know, is there other guys still alive from your unit, or do you have any idea?
You know, our unit was only 4 people.
Okay.
We traveled in small groups, which made you feel kind of lonely when you were out in the jungle sometimes. But no, I've lost contact with all of them, as a matter of fact. But you know, you've just inspired me. I'm going to start looking for them.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
What about when you came back from Vietnam? Then you're a young boy. Then you started to go in law enforcement.
That's correct.
How that started? You went to some school, or how was that process, and where you ended up?
Well, first of all, you have to take a test to qualify to apply for a federal job. I wanted to be a federal agent, not state and local agent. And so once you get the results of the test, then you can start looking at different agencies. And there were only 2 really that I wanted. The first one was called BNDD. It now changed the initials to DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration. And I also looked at the FBI very briefly. And the difference, it's strange. In Hartford, Connecticut, the offices were, the doors to the offices were across the hallway from each other. And it was like 2 different worlds, absolutely. And one was very stiff and regulated, and the other was very open, and it's like having an open mat, you know.
Which one was which?
FBI was very strict and regulated. As a matter of fact, they didn't even, I still had my Vietnam mustache. And they said that had to go. But BNDD, you walked in there and guys with ponytails and goatees, etc. It was very, very different. And I got a job offer, which I took, and went to training for 12 weeks. And that was it. 27 years later, I retired.
So how does your kind of a career went? Like you started as some kind of officer, and you ended up you were some kind of a boss. So walk me through a little bit how these years.
Okay, so you would start off at, let's call it a first lieutenant level at a grade 7. And yes, you're a street agent, and you're supposed to assist in making arrests. You're supposed to do surveillance. You're supposed to try to recruit informants, and you're supposed to try and make cases. And then as you go up the ladder, I did my first 5 years in DEA in New York City. And it was the best place to learn. I'm not trying to brag. I graduated #1 in my training class, and I had my choice of where I could go. And I chose New York because I thought that was the place where I was going to learn the actual mechanics of the job. From New York, I got sent to Mexico. From Mexico, I went to international training for a couple of years. And from there, I went to Puerto Rico, running around the Caribbean. That was wonderful. And then from Puerto Rico, I went to Cairo, Egypt.
Oof.
And from Cairo, I had the portfolio or the responsibility of covering all of East Africa. And you would say, what's an American drug agent doing in Egypt? But there's this thing in Egypt called the Suez Canal. And the amount of drugs that flow through the Suez Canal back in the mid-'80s was overwhelming. And the amount of drugs coming through East Africa at that time, coming out of Southwest Asia, Pakistan, flying on airplanes, in luggage, stopping in Ethiopia, and then bouncing up to Europe was also substantial. And that's what I concentrated on. And then from there, I got sent to headquarters in Washington, D.C. I was very lucky. Most people have to spend at least 2, probably 3 years at headquarters, toiling behind a desk. I went to headquarters where I was sent to inspection. And after 6 months in headquarters, I got Puerto Rico again as head of the office in the Caribbean. And so I went back to a lot of friends after 3 years. But you know, the same potholes were in the streets in Puerto Rico. You've probably never been. It's a great island in the Caribbean, a lot of sunshine, and unfortunately, a lot of crime. And so I enjoyed 3 years. No, I enjoyed 5 years there again. So I spent a total of 8 years in PR. And then from Puerto Rico, I was the special agent in charge in San Francisco, which was a different world, totally different world. I went from cocaine falling out of the sky in Puerto Rico to meth labs in Northern California. And then from there, I got sent to Miami as the head of the office in Miami, which is the largest of all of at that time, it was 17 field divisions.
So everybody was basically working under you at that time?
In Florida, yeah. In San Francisco, yes. And in Puerto Rico, yes. So I had a lot of time. Like in Puerto Rico, I had 70 people working for me. Agents. I'm talking about people running around with guns. In San Francisco, I had about 140 or 150. And then in Miami, I had 700 people doing actual investigations. And then one day I got a call and said, the administrator wants you to come up here and be the deputy administrator. And I said, thank you, but no thank you. I'm not going to move my family again. Because I had gotten married during my last tour in Puerto Rico. And so it meant taking my wife and my young stepson, who was actually my son, from Puerto Rico to San Francisco, from San Francisco to Miami 2 years later, and Miami to headquarters. I did not want to do that. I did not want to disrupt any more of their lives. My son had friends. My wife had, a job as a She's a psychologist, by the way. And I said, no, it's time, what we call pull the pin. And I just retired a bit.
So basically you retired before your big promotion. Basically they offered you a promotion, but you said, that's it for me, thank you.
Well, exactly. It wasn't any more money.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of what's best.
And you had already served 27 years at this point, no?
Yeah, plus 3 years in the Army.
That's a pretty long stint, eh?
Yeah, it was enough.
It was enough. What was the most exotic place where you served? Was it Egypt or the?
I think the most fun that I had being a narcotic agent, I think it had to be Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Because over the span of 3 years and then 5 years, a lot of things were happening. Puerto Rico, I told you, it's they call it La Isla del Encanto, the Enchanted Island. That's what it says on the license plates. But I'll give you an example. In 1995, in the entire United States, now Puerto Rico and the America Samoa, that's also included in these figures, there were 5,000 carjackings, people stopping cars, grabbing people out, and stealing the car. Of those 5,000, 4,000 occurred in Puerto Rico. So the crime in Puerto Rico was overwhelming. It was due to the amount of drugs that was coming through. People didn't realize the amount of cocaine that Pablo Escobar was dropping in the waters outside of Puerto Rico. The Colombian cartels were using Puerto Rico.
Was that kind of some kind of a port, so they put the drugs there, and from there they distributed everywhere? Or
that's exactly right, Miko, because you have to realize Puerto Rico is a U.S. possession. So once you get the drugs into Puerto Rico, and most of them came via airdrop. I mean, imagine people throwing bales of I know you're going to think of marijuana, but bales of cocaine being thrown out of airplanes so that fishing boats could pick them up. And we're talking about loads of 2 tons at a time.
Yeah, and it was, 30 years ago.
Exactly.
What was the biggest haul that you were able to interfere and just like thousands of kilos probably?
Yes, tons, absolutely. But I think there were a couple that really stand out, but I think one of the ones that was most enjoyable was a $14 million seizure of cash that we found in a house behind a false wall. That was one of the highlights that I really enjoyed. And also there was a huge seizure that we made in Egypt, in Cairo, Egypt. As a boat was entering the Suez Canal, we stopped it. We knew what was on it. I shouldn't say we, because it's really the Egyptian authorities.
So
I had given them a phone number that I got from my colleague in Cyprus. He said, we think that someone in Egypt is going to be receiving a big load. And here's his phone number. And it turned out to be correct. The Egyptians went to their magistrate and said, we have information from a reliable source, meaning DEA, that this number is going to be used by traffickers. Within 24 hours, they were wiretapping that phone. And after, I think it was 8 or 10 weeks later, we were sitting there tied on a boat, tied to a buoy, waiting for this.
Was there resistance, any shooting, or you were able to?
No, there was no shooting.
Because they were not expecting you to be there, probably.
No, they were not. And of course they were boarded, and they had 250 kilograms of heroin. They had 2 tons of hashish on board, which was hashish, I don't know, is hashish still a drug of choice?
It's still, because we are in Spain at the moment, so there is a lot of actually hashish coming from Morocco.
Yes, of course.
So that's a big thing still here. So I think the most trafficked narcotics is actually hashish from Morocco to here. I think so.
Yeah, and I guess cocaine is starting to filter in.
I think I read something like 80% of all of cocaine what are used in Europe comes actually like about 40 kilometers where we are now.
Exactly.
That's unbelievable. What do you think about that? How, like, it's just crazy numbers in my mind.
Well, it's hard. I mean, let's face it. From Gibraltar, from the Rock of Gibraltar, to let's say Almeria, that's a lot of coastline.
Yep.
There's a lot of coves, and it's just impossible to patrol. It's literally needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
So you really need intelligence, good intelligence, to find out where that's coming, when it's coming.
What about the DEA? Let's go back to there. So was it like I have been watching these documentaries, Cocaine Cowboys, when there was just flying and the guys were dropping and there's a lot of money and it was kind of reckless. Was it like that? It was just pouring into the country and you're like fighting against windmills. Did you feel like, or you had like a control of the situation, or was it just like pouring a lot of drugs and you're able to catch some of them?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Catch some of them. That's exactly right. I'll give you a brief example. I can remember we had information in Puerto Rico that there was going to be an airdrop off of the island of, I want to say St. Martin. Yes, St. Martin. And of course, from some of the islands, if you're on a high enough point, you can see several other islands. Like from St. Martin, if you look south, you'll see Guadeloupe as an example. So we were there. We were at a lookout, and we could see the plane coming in and making the airdrop. And we were trying to convince the police of St. Martin to go ahead and make that arrest. And they tried, but failed. But as that was happening, Miko, we could see another airdrop occurring maybe 5 or 8 nautical miles away off the coast of Guadeloupe. So it was literally, I mean...
So you need to choose.
Like cocaine was, well, we had no boats down there.
Yeah.
We had to rely on Coast Guard and Customs up around the waters of Puerto Rico. Very seldom would they come south. Well, I shouldn't say that. The Coast Guard would patrol. If we gave them good intelligence, they would patrol.
What about the times in Mexico?
Yeah.
You're working there, and many of our listeners probably have watched the TV series, the Narcos Mexico. Was the series totally out of ballpark, or was there some real things?
I don't think it was totally out of the ballpark. I was actually there. I mean, Kiki Camarena, who was the main focal point of that show, I actually got sent from Mérida in Yucatan, Mexico, to Guadalajara because I had developed a case against what was considered then the major trafficker in Mexico, a fellow by the name of Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo. And so I went there and was continuing the investigation. I think I got there like December 21st. And of course, Christmas was, and Kiki Camarena was already in Guadalajara. And he said, please come to my house for Christmas. And I was a close friend of Kiki and his wife and his 2 kids at that point. 2, maybe he had 3. I remember one of them was like a toddler. But so I started getting closer and closer to Miguel Ángel. And somehow the whistle got blown and he found out that I had been sent to Guadalajara. I mean, I know how he found out, but I won't go into it in this podcast. And so the next thing I know, I'm getting death threats. And it didn't bother me that much until 2 guys showed up outside of my house with shotguns while I was at the office. My wife called me, my first wife. She was, I don't want to say hysterical, but she was definitely nervous. And said, there are 2 guys in a Ford pickup truck outside the house. And we left the consulate right away and drove up there, and they drove off, and we tried to chase them. Well, I tried to calm my wife down. The other guys tried to chase them, but it became evident that there was really no way to guarantee the safety of my wife or even my own safety. So after 7 or 8 months in Guadalajara, DEA decided to pull me out. And about 1.5 or 2 years later, Kiki Camarena picked up that case. And he started rolling with it. And they actually found a huge marijuana plantation, call it. And when that load was captured, Felix Gallardo said, enough is enough. I've lost too much money. Felix Gallardo was dealing in heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. He was the first multi-drug trafficker in the world. And so he got some of his friends in the Mexican government to kidnap Kiki and the informant, an informant that I had actually recruited, and tortured them. They actually buried Kiki alive because they found dirt in his lungs when they found the body. And that really set things off. So is the movie accurate? To a certain degree. Did Kiki go to Mexico specifically to target Felix Gallardo? No. But he did pick up the case afterwards. And he suffered greatly for it.
What about the character in the series? Do you feel that because you knew Kiki personally, was it accurate?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who was that Michael Peña? I think that
I don't remember the actor.
I think it was Michael Peña who portrayed Kiki Camarena in that, and yeah, he did a pretty good job. Now, if you look at the other narcotic series, Narcos, which takes place in Colombia, the main character in that, Javier Peña, is nothing like the way he was portrayed in the...
Tell me how he really was, and what is your relationship with that guy?
Well, Javier Peña, after Escobar was killed on a rooftop in Bogota, Javier Peña, it was time for him to leave. And so he wanted to come to PR and at Puerto Rico. And at that time, I was head of the office there. And I got a call, hey, Peña wants to come. Will you take him? I said, absolutely. Absolutely. So in the series, heavy smoker, heavy drinker, actually having sex with female informants. He is nothing like that. I mean, that was a total fabrication on the part of, Hollywood, just to make him, appear that. As a matter of fact, I think the first words that were spoken in series 1, episode 1, was, Peña is such an asshole. And yet, it's the furthest thing from the truth. Javier Peña is one of the most professional guys you'll ever meet. He was a terrific guy.
He was working with you then in Puerto Rico?
He was.
How long he stayed with you there, and what was the...
I think, it's funny you say this, because I realize how he's followed me. So when I left Puerto Rico, I went to San Francisco, and Javier Peña eventually became head of the office in Puerto Rico. When I left San Francisco to go to Miami, a few years later, Javier became the special agent in charge in San Francisco. So he had a very good career, let's face it. And he was a terrific guy. I mean, I loved working with him. He was so polite, but very professional. The kind of guy you want to represent DEA, whether on the witness stand or in a made-for-TV series.
Right on. What was, and after your last place was, Miami was the last.
That was
how
the
long
last.
Was the last, how many years was in Miami before they made you an offer, what you
2 years.
Ended up years refusing?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. And so at that point, I said another move. I know I haven't said this, but I mean, in my 12 years with DEA, I'm sorry, in my 27 years with DEA, I moved 12 times. And I think the Mexico situation was a root cause of my first divorce. Well, I say my first divorce, my only divorce.
Yeah.
But yes, we got divorced after that. And I just bounced around Africa as a bachelor and Puerto Rico as a bachelor.
How it affected you, like in because you're a disciplined man, like you do a lot of sports and everything. So when you are traveling so a lot and you are doing this kind of job, it requires so much, but you're able to also train the full time. You're running, you're keeping yourself in a good shape, or how that played out.
No, I was running.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's how I kept. Plus, I would do, push-ups, sit-ups,
Yeah.
pull-ups, etc., to stay in shape. A quick story. I'm in a place called Mombasa, Kenya. It's the port. It's the main port for the country of Kenya. And I decided to go out for a run. So I left the hotel. I was running. And this little kid, about 7 or 8 years old, started talking to me in Swahili. And I had no idea what he was saying to me, but he was running with me. So I'm saying, okay, this is fine. He can run with me. So I would pick up the pace, and he would turn to me and look at me and keep running. I said, man, this Kenyan kid can run. And he kept saying to me, mechuka, mechuka. So I would go faster. And so he would say to me, mechuka, mechuka. So finally, when the run was over, I got back to the hotel and I asked the woman at the reception desk, what does mechuka mean? And she said, it means I'm tired. So this little kid, 7 years old, just kept running along my side. He was I should go back and look for that kid. He was terrific.
Was there any reason why he just wanted to, run with you?
I mean, you've seen the athletes that Kenya produces.
Yeah.
They dominate. So I guess they start when they're that.
Do you feel that the running and staying in good health played a role? You become so successful in your job also and able to kind of handle. You're extremely sharp. You're fast and everything, and you have been probably like this forever. So do you think that played a role?
I think physical conditioning played a role. Without it, I'm convinced that running saved my life. I had a heart attack during a triathlon, and they put me in an ambulance. My wife was also doing the triathlon, by the way. This was an Olympic distance triathlon. I said, whoa, where are you taking me? And they said, we're taking you to Mercy Hospital in Miami. I said, no, you got to let me out, because if my wife can't find me, she's going to have a heart attack. So they made me sign a paper, and they brought me back and let me out, a release. And so I told my wife, what had happened, and I said, I have this heaviness, etc. So we went to the hotel and showered. And I said, I think I'm okay. And she said, no, Mitch, come on, don't do this to me. So she drove me to the hospital. When I walked in, I passed out by then. And so I had, I didn't know it at the time, but by the way, I was a carnivore. I used to eat meat all the time.
I cannot wait. We're going to go for a diet later, so I want to hear that.
And so I was, actually I had 2 100% blockages, and I was passing a blood clot through the 3rd major artery. And the doctor said, I have no idea why you're still alive. But when they went inside and looked, he said, I've never seen so many ancillary capillaries in someone's heart, because as my arteries grew thick with all of this plaque, it was forcing my body to produce these small little capillaries. They're called ancillary capillaries throughout my heart, just so that my heart could make up from the blockages in the main arteries. And that's literally because I was running for so many years. I was doing half marathons all the time. I was doing triathlons, etc., with all of these blockages forming. The night before I had the heart attack, by the way, I had a ribeye steak. So
Maybe it's that.
maybe that was the reason.
So all of you guys who love ribeye steak, well, it comes with the risk. Right on. Okay, let's go back because I want to ask something. During all of your years in law enforcement, and especially in the 80s and 70s, early days, what was the level of corruption? Like were there a lot of corrupt policies who were like how was
Yeah,
that?
interesting. I remember going on a TV show in Puerto Rico, and there was corruption in the Puerto Rico Police Department. But the TV personality turned to me immediately and said, "Mr. Mitchell, is there corruption in DEA?" And I said, "I think there's corruption everywhere, but there's so little of it in DEA that it's hardly worth mentioning." And I still believe that there's very little corruption in any federal agency in the U.S., although it might occur at higher levels now under the new administration. But I mean, obviously in Mexico, the corruption was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Just overwhelming. And it went all the way up to the presidency in Mexico and the ministers. When I say ministers, the ministers of justice, of health, of education, et cetera, everybody. There was no one you could trust, which led to the demise of Kiki Camarena. I did not see corruption in Egypt. It was a very specialized unit there. But of course, I did see corruption in East Africa. Other than that, I can't remember any state and local police agencies that exhibited any amount of corruption. Because you have to remember, everyone back then was so tuned into this idea of corruption. If you look at the very first movie that I saw about narcotics trafficking was The French Connection, and they talk about the corruption in that movie, of course. But so everybody was hypersensitive about that. I remember one time, have you seen the movie American Gangster? It's about...
Yes, I've seen the movie.
Okay, it's about a guy named Frank Lucas.
Yep.
Okay.
Sold heroin in Bronx or something.
Yes, exactly. So he had a house in New Jersey, and we had a warrant for that house. And as we were going through the front door, one of the newer agents was at the back of the house. And he saw this suitcase come out of the window and then a leg come out. So he put the person under arrest. So we went through the house, we executed the search warrant. Frank Lucas was not there. But we had about somewhere under $250,000, which at that time in 1974, 75, it was the most money I had ever seen in my life at one time. And I remember the deputy of the New York office came over to look at it. And he said to us, "Okay, this is a great job. Make sure everybody pats down everyone else before they leave." And he left. And everybody looked at each other and said, "But we're sitting here, we're together. No one is, putting a $10 bill in their shoe." And to pat down everybody else would set a terrible precedence. There were 6 of us there. It's hard to hide any money.
And it probably feels like, don't you trust me, pat everything down? You're expecting that somebody's stealing something.
Listen, I learned a long time ago, not everything is black and white. There's a lot of gray areas. Just like in Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of gray areas.
No, of course. Okay. What about recruiting informants? Like how does the process work? So, because something you probably use your work quite a lot. You had people who were giving you information.
Yeah.
But how is the recruiting process? How do you find these people?
I used to teach a class on recruiting for the 2.5 years that I spent in training. As a matter of fact, back then I wrote the syllabus for recruitment of informants. But I mean, there are 3 things that you can use to motivate an informant. Number 1 would be the emotional aspect of it. And there's many emotions involved. Fear might be an emotion. Patriotism might be an emotion. Then you have the mercenary aspect of it. I want to get paid to work with you. So if I make a case for you, then I expect to get paid. And then the last thing would be idealism. You know, hey, I'm a good Muslim. I want to help you do this work. So those are the basic, but really most of the informants of high value come following arrests.
So basically, they end up in a bad situation, and you're gonna talk them through. You need to give us information, otherwise you're gonna spend a long time in jail. Yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, that's their only option. Yeah. Do you remember any kind of informant story? You don't need to tell names, but something that was really, really important for some case, and with some specific information, you were able to blow some big case down, like some.
Yeah. I can give you an example, and it goes way back to like 1974. We worked a case for 6 months with the NYPD, and we executed a search warrant at a house in the Bronx, and we found 10 kilograms of heroin in, again, a fake wall in a closet. And we made 2 arrests. And I can remember sitting there on the sidelines, really, when they came in to talk to the guy that got arrested. He had spent the last 17 years of his life in jail. He was out for 6 or 7 months and was moving huge quantities of heroin. And I remember my senior partner went over to the guy and said, hey, Tony, remember, this is a mafia guy. Hey, Tony, you want to be a rat? And Tony said, of course not. And I remember my senior partner saying to him, yeah, the only thing this case needs is a woman. And so Tony realized at that point that they were talking about his girlfriend. And he said, whoa, stop. I don't want her to go to jail. What do you want to know? And that led to a huge roundup of really mafia-connected people. It was a great case.
A lot of arrests made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
26, I think, if I recall.
Any nice mafia stories, what you can tell without names, like what has happened, some crazy cases, something?
Well, that was one of them right there.
Did you work against like the organized crime, of course, because in DEA, that's probably big part of the drug world, organized crime,
Yes.
and their trafficking.
So if you say organized crime, are you talking about...
in this case, in like mafia. Like
Mafia. You're talking about Italian organized crime.
Gambinos, etc.
Right, exactly. Well, that case that I just mentioned was involving organized crime. I do remember a story. After I had left New York, I came back, I think, to testify in a trial. And just prior to that, one of the agents working undercover, I won't mention names, but he made the mistake of getting into the trafficker's car, a very low-level mafia guy. And they took him to another place, and surveillance never saw him leave. So there were mistakes committed on both sides. But one thing is, never show him the money until you see the dope, and never go anywhere with them. They found him a couple of days later dead. He was assassinated, very mafia style. They couldn't find him at first, but they finally found him after, I guess it was the next day. So DEA began to put up heavy surveillance on all of the mafia people in Brooklyn that they knew this guy worked for, this low-level mafia guy. They knew who he was, they just could not find him. So they started putting pressure. And when I say pressure, I don't mean, they would just sit outside of the house. When the guy came out, whatever mafia boss it was, they would start to follow him.
And they want to be visible.
They were very visible.
Okay, and it was by
This
purpose.
was very overt pressure. Hey, where is this guy? We want to know. It came to a point where the mafia people in Brooklyn were saying, hey, listen, we can't put up with this any longer. They would come out of their house and say, listen, I'm going to drive down and get some cannolis at the bakery, and then I'm going to come home, okay? Or whatever. Finally, they said, okay, enough is enough. So DEA at the base station in New York received a phone call saying, you will find Joe Gabucha's, he's going to be on the corner of such and such in Brooklyn in a, 1975 Chevy Caprice. And so they went there and they saw a 1975 Chevy Caprice, but there was nobody in it until they opened the trunk and they found this fellow assassinated in the trunk of the car. And so the mafia people said, okay, we've delivered our man to you.
And they couldn't take the risk by delivering the guy by life because he could talk.
Then he would.
Wow.
That's exactly right.
Unbelievable.
That's exactly right.
Unbelievable. All right, I could talk with you probably full night, but we're going to continue. Now, what about when you left DEA and as your profession, you started to do like a private security, how your career went from there when you stopped in DEA in Miami, and after that, what happened?
So I actually joined a law firm. I wasn't a lawyer, but they wanted an investigative subsidiary to their law firm saying, hey, we have these top-level investigators that you can use, that their clients could use. And so I was the number 2 guy in that at first, and then I became the number 1 guy in that. And yeah, I did that for like 7 or 8 years. And then after the heart attack, I decided I don't want this stress anymore. So that's when I went out on my own, actually. I went out on my own, and several of the clients that had used me before started calling me. And so I just had this thing I called Mitchell Investigative Consulting, LLC.
So they were asking your help to investigate things,
Yeah, most of it was corporate.
Yeah.
Most of it was doing audits of their security system. Some of it was, hey, we've been defrauded of $64 million. Can you find it?
Yeah.
Things like that. And yeah. So that's basically what I did until, I think I was about 64 is when I started Jiu-Jitsu. So I think I was about 66 or 67 when I stopped everything.
You are still doing your job when you started to do Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah.
You had your company still. Where was your company located?
Well, at first Miami.
Yeah.
And then from Miami, we moved up to the northern part of Florida. By the way, it's a heavy tourist area, beautiful, 117 miles of white powder sand on the Gulf of Mexico. It's called Destin. Well, the whole area, but one of the main resort areas is called Destin, Florida. And we lived just outside of Destin, and I was still continuing my business. But I was really, really I think that was 2009. So I think by 2011 or 12 is when I finally stopped it.
How did you stop? Did you sold your company or just because by?
No,
it was
I
you-
didn't sell it.
Okay.
I just stopped.
Wow.
And
Do you ever regret it? Like,
Huh?
why did you why you didn't want to sell it, but you probably made good life already because you have been working a lot. So why didn't
Yeah.
you sell it? But you just wanted to. It's
there
not-
was nothing to sell.
Oh yeah, because you are the product. Kind of way what you do. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Nice.
My office was one room in my bed in my house, next to my bedroom. So
Yeah.
it was nothing.
You enjoy now living in Spain?
I've been here 6.5 years, and I love Spain.
Nice.
Absolutely. Went to Barcelona first,
Yeah.
where I trained with Robin Gracie, who's
Yeah.
a great guy, and then Demis in Alicante. And now here in Malaga, I train at that Roger Gracie Academy in Malaga, and come down here every once in a while to roll with you and try to beat you up.
I know, I can feel it. You're doing a great job. But Spanish, hey, let's talk about, because you speak really good Spanish. Where did you learn that? Was it in the Mexico trip or Puerto Rico? What?
Actually, yeah. I majored in Spanish in college.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I majored in Spanish and minored in political science. And so, of course, the natural place to send me was Vietnam. But anyway, so when I got home, I still had some Spanish. And in New York, I would go undercover as we used to call them New Yorkers, people of Puerto Rican descent that lived in New York. And believe me, there's millions. And I would go undercover as a New Yorker because I couldn't trust my Spanish enough. Plus, I have this ugly gringo accent. So, yeah. But once I got to Mexico, then that's when it started to blossom again.
But you are also working undercover in your early days. As an undercover officer, no?
Listen, the only guy in the group that spoke Spanish, I was undercover at least once a week. Yeah.
Any stories about that journey? That must be so stressful. You basically need to, pretend that you're somebody else and you are in a really high level risk all the time. Or is it like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I learned very, very early on to tell as few lies as possible.
Okay.
So my undercover name always was Mitch, because I could remember that name, always. And I remember one time a guy came up from South Carolina to do a case. He had a lead on this guy that lived in New York. And so when he said, I need someone to come undercover with me, and I said, of course, I'll go undercover with you. And so when we got there and sat down, the guy said, yeah, I want you to meet my money man, Rico. And I looked at him like, wait a minute, that's not my name. I've never used that name in my life.
Yeah.
But I didn't say that. I just kept going by Rico. But when the two bad guys would talk to me, they would say Rico, and I wouldn't, oh yeah, that's me, yeah. It was so
Confusing,
weird.
Probably like, where did they get the Rico?
Yeah, I know, and I asked him that. He said it just sounded like a name of a good Puerto Rican up in New York.
And also to Rico, what is the Rico law? What that came from?
Racketeering, racketeering influence. Rico, yeah. Can't think of it.
No,
Corrupt something or other.
Yeah, no.
Corrupt organization.
I think people will love this episode. I'm so excited about talk with you about this. And okay, let's dive in a little bit back to the Jiu-Jitsu part in your life. So how about your Jiu-Jitsu belts? So where did you get your first belt? How did that felt, and how long it took for you to start the process and get your first belt?
So with the Gracie University curriculum, in order to get a blue belt, you had to be able to perform flawlessly, or at least 95% flawlessly, 36 techniques, 12 standing and 24 on the ground. But when you added up the different variations, it was actually 73 techniques that you had to know. And you had to do them in a certain amount of time with a cooperating partner, and then you were judged on it, graded on it. You had to send in your product to someone that taught in Torrance at Gracie University, who would look through the elements that you had sent and grade it. And if you didn't get 95, you didn't get your blue belt. So it took me about 14 months to go from white belt to blue belt. And then it took me, the next 6.5 years, I was a blue belt. I stayed a blue belt. I went to Gracie University to become an instructor. That was even more difficult than trying to do the blue belt test. And you had to be able to do certain things in a certain way, give the instruction using a certain method of instruction, what we call MOI, method of instruction. And then you had to perform it in front of, you know who Huron and Henner Gracie are?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. They're the sons of Horian Gracie.
They run the Gracie University, no?
They run Gracie University. Yeah. Their father ran Gracie Academy there for a while, and then it split off. By the way, their father's an interesting guy, Horian Gracie.
Yep.
So he's never mentioned. I mean, people mention, who are the best? Well, of course, Hoist Gracie comes up because he won UFC 1, 2, and 4. Hickson Gracie because he was the greatest fighter in Japan ever. Roger Gracie because he's the best points fighter ever. But Horian Gracie his name never comes up. And yet, he was the first guy from Brazil to bring Jiu-Jitsu to the States.
Yep, and he was a founder of UFC, this guy.
People don't realize that.
People don't realize. Let's dive into that. That's insane, but that's beautiful.
Yeah. There's a famous actor in the U.S. called Ed O'Neill, and Ed took nothing but private lessons from Horian Gracie. He's a black belt now, Ed O'Neill. But when he asked, and this was way back in the early 90s, when he asked Horian, so who are you going to use to fight? Which one of your brothers is going to fight in the match? And he said, I think I'm going to use Hoist. And he said, Hoist, the skinny kid that lives in the upstairs in your garage? He said, that Hoist? And he said, yeah, I think we're going to use Hoist because, it'll show that...
Prove a point. No. With Hoist, you don't need to be big, strong.
Exactly.
Yeah. So he wanted to prove a point with,
just like, Grandmaster Elio always talks about.
Yeah, and Elio was not a big guy,
He was like my size, I think.
And can you imagine, all of the Elios, for example, whoever he was fighting back in the days, probably every single one of them was bigger than him.
Yeah. What was the Japanese guy that threw him around the ring for a while?
It
was a big event.
Yep.
It could have been Sakuraba.
I don't know, maybe. And also, I don't remember, maybe.
Might have been Kimura.
Yeah, exactly.
It might have been Kimura that did it. But I saw that fight, on very grainy film. The grandsons would know, Henner and Huron, they would know. Huron used to spend all of his summers in Brazil with his grandfather. He's the oldest grandson. But all they do is just teach at that academy. And I think they've been very, very successful.
So you got your blue belt from there.
Yes.
From Gracie University. What about, you got your purple belt also from there, or?
I did not.
Okay.
So when I went to Barcelona, I was there 2 months. and Robin gave me my purple belt. Because I went there, I was a 4-stripe blue belt. I had been a blue belt for 6 years. I was also doing instruction of white belts. I could take a white belt and not promote them, but make them ready to be promoted to blue belt. And then Robin gave me my purple belt very quickly. And then I went to Alicante, and Demis, after 2 years there, gave me my brown belt. And I only spent 3.5 years as a brown belt before I got promoted. And I will say this, in all honesty, I always suffered from belt doubt. Am I really
like
good enough
I'm
to...
not worth this belt.
Yeah. Am I really
Imposter
worthy?
syndrome. Like,
It's exactly.
you still have it, you know?
Yeah.
You're still a little bit like,
I still have it. But see, now being so old, I always revert to old man jiu-jitsu, always. And if I can hold you down for a while, I'll hold you down. And if I get lucky, and I can put you in a kimura or arm triangle, whatever. Yeah, so I play old man jiu-jitsu all
and
the
when
time.
so you got your brown belt then, and when did you get your black belt?
Last December, 6 months ago.
What a journey. How does it feel to, of course we don't do this for belts, but I always tell people when they say like, we don't do this for belts, of course we don't do this for belts, but we get new belts so rarely that there's a lot of work that crystallizes in that moment. So I'm always like, in that moment, I'm thinking about the full journey. How did it feel to finally get the, you know, most respected belt in martial arts world, which is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt?
I cried. Couldn't help it. Couldn't hold it back. I cried. Because at that point, it had been 13 and a half years. And I don't think I ever missed more than 2 weeks of not being inside or on a tatami. I mean, even when I went on vacation with my wife, I would go to a tatami somewhere. I would go to a school, no matter where. Valencia, Barcelona. Italy, I did not, no, we were in Italy for like 2 weeks and I didn't train in Italy. But other than that.
But it's still it's still impressive. But it's a discipline, and it's also because we get hooked to this. Because the good thing and the bad thing in jiu-jitsu is when you start to do it and you do it long enough, you need to do it forever. Because, for example, if I'm not training in 2 weeks, I feel miserable. Like I start to doubt myself. My mindset goes away. Like everything starts to almost break down if I don't have the training. So I need to also train. Of course, I enjoy it, but now when we start, I cannot stop. I cannot stop.
I know exactly what you're saying. I remember when I first started, I had a trip to Guatemala, and I was trying to learn triangle. And so I told Carlos, I'm going to be gone for a week. He said, oh, okay, I'll see you. And I can remember being in Guatemala with one of those long pillows that they put on beds in the hotel, trying to remember the steps of, okay, what do I want to do this triangle? And at that point, I said to myself, this is hard, but I think I'm hooked. I remember one time having lunch during Huron Gracie's seminar in Destin. And we were coming back, and Huron said to the 3 of us that were in the car with him, so why do you think so many people quit jiu-jitsu after they get their blue belt? And I immediately said, because it's hard. And he said, it's hard. He said, I think it's easy. And I said, you were born in a gi. You were wearing your kimono, you know, when you were what, 2 or 3 years old. So what comes so basic to someone who just lives that life all the time, to me it was just mind-boggling the stuff that Elio was able to come up with. And I guess, of course, the Japanese masters before him.
What do you think? What do you think are the most important things when you do something as hard as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at your older age? Like you talk about old man Jiu-Jitsu. What do you mean by that? Like,
okay, yeah. So you start to lose a certain amount of flexibility, of course. I really don't think I've lost much strength, by the way. You felt my grip.
yeah, you're strong.
Right.
You had me a gift wrap. I was there.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, I'll give you an example. I spent almost a month in private classes with Demis in Alicante, trying to learn de la riva, berimbolo, back take. Now, I could do the de la riva.
yeah.
It was the berimbolo part that was so difficult for me. And I said, Demis, I said, you got to understand, I have, these 2 rods and 4 screws in my back. And it doesn't let me do what you do so easily. And it really can inhibit you at times. So do I do berimbolos? I think I did one with you a couple of weeks ago, but it was a half-assed berimbolo. So no, I don't try to spin underneath. But I always think of it this way. To me, Jiu-Jitsu will always be a martial art. It will always be a personal defense type of martial art. I don't care about points. I don't look at points. I don't know what counts as points. Well, I'm starting to learn being in Gracie Academy. But for me, it's pure self-defense. So do I want to be outside on that sidewalk doing a berimbolo? I don't think so. I could do it, or I could spin on my back in here. But I always try to apply mentally what I would do out there. There's a podcast. Have you heard of Rick Ellis?
Yep.
Yeah, he's a Roy Dean black belt.
Yep.
And he's really into old man jiu-jitsu. And that I watch his YouTube moments because I like the way he presents things. I will admit there are certain people that I look at on YouTube. The first one is you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's how I was going to give a class on triangles, and of course the normal one is from the closed guard, and then from the mount. And I found a video of you doing a triangle from the mount.
Lift the head and block the.
And I want you to stay on top.
Yes. Exactly. I want you to stay on top, baby. If we get on top, we stay on top.
So
that video, nice.
Then I started following you. Then I saw you in the Kimura Cup
last year. We met
last year. And I came up to you and said, I have seen you on YouTube. I think you're terrific. And ever since then, I've tried to keep this connection with you because, I don't know, I just kind of felt good meeting you that day. But yeah, so I look at stuff that Rick Ellis does, and I look at stuff that Jean-Jacques Machado does.
I love Machado. He is, I don't know, the way how he teaches, and there is still every single day when I watch something that Jean-Jacques teaches, I'm like, my mind blows. And the way I would love to meet that guy. Have you met?
I haven't.
Ah.
Now, I've met Pedro Sauer,
Yeah.
who I think there are 2 people in the States that are considered the utmost of teachers. And one would be Jean-Jacques Machado, and the other would be Pedro Sauer. And I have taken 4 seminars with Pedro. Now, I don't know if Pedro knows my name, but if he saw me, he would come over. hello, my friend, how are you?
Yeah.
That's just the way he is,
Yeah.
you know? But to me, and I know why he would do that, because I'm older than him.
Oh, for the respect kind of way, no?
So, I mean, so a lot of people remember me just because, oh, that was the old guy on the mat that we were rolling with. I don't mind that. I like hanging around youngsters like you.
Yeah, yeah. And for you, to be really honest, you are really inspirational for me also, because I'm 45, and of course I'm like I have a good confidence. I believe my abilities and everything, but I'm getting a little bit older. I'm starting to think like, okay, I'm getting older, Miko. But when I meet you, we roll around and we become friends. So I'm like, if this guy can do this when he's 78, I'm like, I have still a lot of time. You're really inspirational for me, and I'm really grateful that we became friends. So
No.
it's amazing.
Believe me, it is my pleasure to be here with you. I mean, ever since that day that I saw that first YouTube video with this guy with these tattoos and everything, and
You felt my energy.
it was one of those come to Jesus moments. Oh, I got it. I got it. Eureka. Oh, wow. I wondered if I could do the spin like you did the spin. And I actually step on the guy's arm just to cause a little bit of old man pain and then bring it around.
Works.
Yeah, it works.
You still teach the triangle about the same way?
You know, I teach sometimes at Roger Gracie Academy here in Malaga when Monty, Jose Luis Montiel, who's my instructor now, and of course Pablo Cabo, who is the owner. I think Pablo Cabo at one time instructed Santeri, right?
Yeah, that was back in the day. I did a pretty long time ago. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, more or less, or something like that.
Before I got to Spain.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when Monty can't make it, I always tell him, hey, cuenta conmigo, count on me, because I just love to teach. And I still use that same, okay, here's the application. When are we going to use this? Why do we want to use this? And how do we do it? Let's break it down into slices.
Exactly. Do you think that teaching Jiu-Jitsu makes you better at Jiu-Jitsu?
100%.
Break it down. Why?
Because you have to learn the move precisely in order to teach the move correctly. And once you teach, it's kind of like learning Spanish. They say if you read and write a word 10 times, it'll be here. If you use it 100 times, it's yours forever.
Yep.
You won't lose that word. Jiu-Jitsu is something like that. Now, I don't know if you have to do an arm bar 100 times, but certainly if you do an arm bar 10 or 20 times, you're going to remember it. Then if you're able to explain how to do it, that's a whole different level.
And I agree 100%, because also I have been teaching basically since I was a white belt, or at least helping teachers. And I always I always teach only the stuff that I know. But I realized like a couple of years ago that really, if you're teaching like techniques and you do it, at least in my mind, like properly, you break it down on the pieces. Because also if you can just do some move, but you cannot break it down, and if it doesn't work, you cannot kind of, why it didn't work? Because when it's pieced down, you know, okay, because this piece was missing or whatever it is. So I think it makes you much, much better in Jiu-Jitsu when you are teaching.
You just mentioned something that, have you noticed that if you're teaching a move, let's just say triangle from the guard, that the first time you teach it, there's no way you can cover everything that you need to say in order for that person to do it 100% correctly. Because there's so many intricate movements that have to take place. So you can't expect to teach a new student a new technique with the first day. The next day you come in and you can say, okay, so you're going to put your foot on his hip so that you can make an adjustment so that your leg, for example, comes parallel across their shoulders. You don't want it going down their back, so you have to make that adjustment.
Exactly.
So the first time you can say that, but they might not catch it. So the next time you can stress that.
But that's also a mindset. If you really want to be a teacher, if you really want to, be a coach, because there is also coaches who doesn't want to involve and like make themselves better. Like I want to make myself always better by teaching. And now we talk about triangles. Actually, a couple of years ago, I've been teaching triangles for a very long time. Understand like how I can tell people that the angle is really important, that you create a proper angle. And then when you see your opponent's ear, inside your opponent's ear, then you are in the perfect angle. And now I use it in arm bar setups and also in the triangles. Like when you shoot there, I cannot see inside the ear. What is wrong? Bum, bum, bum. I want to see inside the ear. And that was after years and years of teaching triangle. But I was so excited, because this is a, small piece of information, but this has changed a lot of my students' game what comes to triangles, because now they know immediately when they shoot, I need to see inside the ear. Bum, we create the angle. There it is.
Like taking the back from the guard.
Yep.
When you get around to, and we were doing some of that today while we were rolling. If I can look at your ear, then I'm in the right position. And I have said that several times when I have taught taking the back from the guard.
That's it. All right, let's dive this. What about the diet? So
the diet.
Tell me, what do you eat? You are vegan, vegetarian? What is your...
Okay. So I had an episode back in 2010. I was on my bike and I started sweating and went into what is called tachycardia. That's when your heart is beating far more than it should. And I was in so I was 5 miles from home on my bike. I biked back home. It was pouring water over my head. I came inside. My wife was meditating and I didn't want to bother her, so I showered off. And when I came out of the shower, she had finished her meditation. And I said, I think I need to go to the hospital. So she called 911, which I thought was excessive. But anyway, I was in AFib. And they had to, put the paddles on your chest and poof.
Okay.
Exactly. I remember the guy was getting ready to do it. And I was in the ambulance and I said, wait. I said, have you ever done this before? And he said, not on a real person.
That must give you a lot of confidence.
So I said, I'll wait if you'll wait. And he said, he looked out, he pulled looked out the curtain of the ambulance and said, oh, we're almost at the hospital now. So it was a good thing I didn't have to do that.
At least he was honest.
Yeah, I know it. Not on a real, so they've done it on dummies. Yeah. But anyway, that was the episode that changed my diet, so to speak. I took a whole new outlook on what I was doing. And so I went totally vegan. Not even eating nuts, not using oils, nothing like that. Avocados, no. Totally vegan for about 1.5 years. And it was really difficult getting protein. I would drink protein shakes in the morning. And so then from vegan, I went to vegetarian, which made things a little bit easier. And then from vegetarian, I went to eating eggs. And I had a doctor in Barcelona, a cardiologist, who said, you don't need to do that. Just follow a good Mediterranean diet. And so I added chicken, but that's it, chicken and turkey.
Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, I eat a lot of vegetables, I eat chicken and turkey, and drink a lot of protein shakes in the morning. How about you?
We have actually pretty the same. I don't eat red meat almost at all. I eat a lot of good organic eggs, chicken, full grain, basmati rice.
Right.
A lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, salads, and a lot of olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Nowadays, I have like maybe almost a liter a week.
Really?
Yeah, because my problem is also because I'm skinny and I train so much, so I need to get a lot of calories, and I found a lot of benefits, and I feel great. I feel now maybe I'm definitely the best shape in my life. My mind is good. I feel super happy. Like I'm calm. I'm collective. Everything is working perfectly. And of course, I understand. And actually, funny thing, I was like, first time I have had these strange dreams, like 10, 15 years, nothing bad, but I'm falling and everything. And it's always like blurry, and I wake up many times. But let's say 2 or 3 months ago, first time in 15 years, I fell asleep, and then I opened my eyes and it was morning. And I was like, what has happened? And I was so happy. But I understood it must be like my decisions previously, like the diet and everything. And when I become happy, like I'm truly happy, I don't stress about things, and
Right.
everything is fine in my life. And I was like, amazing. I was so happy. And then I decided, okay, I need to stick to this, and I need to do the right things, because if you can have a good sleep, that's priceless.
Oh.
That's priceless. How do you sleep, man?
Poorly. Yeah. But that's okay. I kind of adapt to it. One thing that hasn't afflicted me yet, I mean, the back, the heart, etc., but is having to get up during the middle of the night to urinate, to pee. I haven't reached that stage of my old age yet.
That's great.
A lot of guys have to get up
Because
and
it cuts
pee.
the cuts the sleep cycle.
Yeah, it just doesn't. But I notice that when I sleep about 3.5 hours, I'll wake up. I'll fall back asleep for about 3 hours, and then wake up. And to me, that's 6.5 or maybe 7 hours of sleep. That's it. That's all I need. But I do notice that I'll take a 20 or 30 minute nap in the afternoon. I remember in Barcelona, my wife was saying, I'm very worried about you, Mitch. Every afternoon you're taking a nap for like 20 or 30 minutes. She said, I think we should go see the doctor. So we make an appointment. It was this woman doctor. And my wife says, I'm worried about my husband because every afternoon he falls asleep. And the doctor said, oh, but that's great. We recommend it highly here in Spain. We think that it's exactly what you should do. And so I think the key here is 20 to 30 minutes, not 1.5 to 2 hours.
I think that's the problem. People sleep, too long. The nap needs to be like, I think they even did some research, like it was the optimal nap was something like 50 minutes, or like something like that. So what about your routines? Do you have like let's say, for example, morning, do you have a specific routines, what you do?
Absolutely.
Morning? Tell me, walk me through.
First thing I do is drink coffee, strong coffee, 2 cups, and then take my dog for a walk, 2 or 3 kilometers. Come back, drink my protein shake, and then go train.
So no like a breakfast, you have the coffee and protein shake before the training.
Yes.
And then you train and you eat when you come back.
I go to training with just a protein shake.
Yeah.
Or perhaps a power bar,
Yeah.
in me. Yeah. I don't worry. As long as I have the protein shake, I don't think I'm going to get that sugar bonk where you get way down and your sugar's real low. That doesn't seem to happen. And then I'll train for an hour, hour and a half. But I've never found jiu-jitsu training to be strenuous enough to make me feel like, okay, I've worked out hard today. I mean, I can roll for 20 or 30 minutes, but mentally, I have to go home and either do a 3-kilometer run, jump on the stationary bike for 30 minutes, or I have a rowing machine at home, or row for 30 minutes. And I do that. If I do jiu-jitsu, let's say 4 or 5 times a week, I'll also add in that other workout. Only because my watch, my heart rate monitor, which I'm wearing right now, tells me that my jiu-jitsu training doesn't elevate my heart rate enough.
It doesn't elevate it enough. So,
It doesn't.
okay.
So today you and I rolled for what, 50 minutes?
Yeah, about, yeah.
Okay. My highest heart rate, 81.
Pretty calm.
Yeah.
But is it only the physical part, but also because you know your stuff and you're calm in every possible situations? Maybe that also helps because you can keep yourself, you don't panic or anything like that, even though the bad position, good position, you can just stay calm and collected.
Yeah. I was telling the guy the other day in jiu-jitsu in Malaga, I said, you notice when I roll, I never roll with my fists closed because it takes more energy than if I roll like this. I mean, to me, the best way to learn jiu-jitsu is to flow jiu-jitsu. Try to flow when you're training, when you're rolling. Because if you're flowing into a movement like that sweep that you showed me today,
Yeah.
if you flow into that sweep, you learn it because you're doing it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're not doing it, vroom,
Yep.
You're doing it. So I do a lot of flowing.
Me too. And actually, today I was also teaching the normal class before you came. And actually, I made my students today, we were cooling down. We did 4 or 5-minute rounds, like normal sparring. And after that, I said, we're going to do 5-minute round, no submissions. And when we do flow rolls, I always tell people, like, when we do flow rolls, there's no submission, but if you need to have like some kind of competitive aspect in your mind, think about like always when I switch position, I get a point. Like if I'm in a side control, I go to the mount, aka point, and if I abandon the position, but keep the movement.
Exactly.
I love do flow, like flow rolling. It's just, and there's still a lot of guys who doesn't know how to do flow rolling. But it's strange. There is still like even high level guys. They are like, I cannot. For me, it's a little bit strange.
Robin Gracie flows like you can't believe. I remember the first time I touched him, we started to roll, and he said, where did you learn to roll? I really like it. And I said, Carlos Diaz taught me this in the States, this idea of flowing. And then I went to Demis in Gracie Baja Alicante, and Demis doesn't flow. Demis does not flow. Demis is...
So when rolling, it's go for the submission. There is no...
Now, Pablo Cabo flows. He has to. He's my size.
Yeah.
And he got his black belt directly from Roger Gracie. Roger Gracie's a pretty tough guy. I mean...
He's amazing. That's amazing.
And yet, when you look at, I've tried to look at as many videos of him as possible. And I can honestly say I don't think I've ever seen him on video. I've never seen him do a beating bolo.
Me neither. It's like basic jiu-jitsu, heavy pressure, mount, cross-choke from there. And I think it's even more powerful because if you do something that people are expecting to do the same stuff, and they know that you're going to try to do it, but you can still do it. That's true power for jiu-jitsu. I do this move, I'm gonna mount you, and I'm gonna cross-choke you, and there's nothing that you can do, even though you know what I'm trying to do. That's amazing.
I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that he told some people, I'm gonna beat you today, and I'm gonna beat you using lapel choke. I don't know if it's true, someone told me that story. But knowing who he is.
Yeah.
I've never met him, by the way.
Oh.
I mean, I'm a Roger Gracie black belt because I got it at a Roger Gracie Academy. And I know that he sent his representative, great guy named Bruno Sancaner, Brazilian guy that's one of his main instructors in the UK. He came to be at the ceremony. But I can honestly say being a Roger Gracie black belt, but I'm not a Roger Gracie caliber type of
but there is a lot of
opponent.
Hodge Crazy academies around the world, and maybe you will meet him one day. You know,
Yeah, oh, I'm sure I will.
and he's still fairly young, like younger than me. I'm 45. I think. Hodge
Yeah,
Crazy-
I think he's 41 or 42.
But it's still-
But I think he's hung up his.
And can you imagine the career? And he's like amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing.
You know who else is pretty amazing? His father,
Oh yeah,
Mauricio Gomez.
Mauricio. Yeah, exactly. And Mauricio actually lives with. I think he lives also in London, and I think they train.
Yeah.
They train in the headquarters.
I know Mauricio had a heart issue
Yeah.
not too long ago, maybe a year or so ago, but
Yep.
I guess he's doing fine.
Yeah. All right, let's go a little bit more jiu-jitsu part. Like, what would be your tips for the fellow old man who does jiu-jitsu? Like, protect yourself. How do you can save energy while you're rolling?
Well, yeah. First of all, my jiu-jitsu is defensive. I play defensive jiu-jitsu. Some people might think that's not a good idea. You'll never win a tournament. I don't care. I'm not trying to win tournaments. Carlos Diaz told me this. He said that Helio Gracie came to Eddie Camden's academy in Atlanta, Georgia. And Carlos was like a 4-stripe white belt. And Helio Gracie is there, 80 some odd years old. Helio Gracie wanted to roll with some of the guys. So he would get on his back and say, okay, mount me and submit me. So Helio would spend like 2 or 3 minutes like this. When the buzzer went off, he said, okay, that's it, I win. Oh, no, I win. If you cannot submit an 85-year-old man in 2 or 3 minutes, how can you say you won? So sometimes defending is winning.
True.
Preventing the submission.
Do you believe also in the Boyd belts?
Yeah. You know, that came from Henner and here on Gracie.
I think that's on point. The principle. It's not realistic. Like if I'm 20 years older than the other guy and he's all like, there needs to be something that, you know,
Exactly.
you can a little bit balance.
Rick Ellis even took that farther.
Yeah.
He brought it down to stripes even. I was just watching a video of his the other night. But yeah, I definitely do. And I think it's for every 10 pounds, it's a belt.
Yeah.
And for every 10 years of age, it's a belt. So if a guy weighs 20 pounds more than you do, either you go down 2 belts or he goes up 2 belts. I mean, yeah, I think, although I think that if you're a white belt and you're fighting, or if you're a black belt and you're fighting a white belt, the white belt shouldn't be able to beat you.
That's true.
I mean, I think.
And actually, that's something that, because we have extremely good blue belts. We have Christian, young guy, and he was already, when he was a blue belt, he was beating black belts. But if you're a black belt, then there's a white belt. I agree. You shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a different ballgame if the guy is like former NCAA wrestler
Wrestling
or something.
champ.
But just, normal human being, because the gap is, because there's so much knowledge. And even though they're strong, whatever, you need to be able to shut them down if you're a black belt. You have been doing this very long then. So.
Yeah.
All right. What about, because your memory is so impressive. You have really sharp memory. Do you eat any supplements or anything like that? Oh,
I do.
Tell me, what is your supplement collection?
I just found a new one, by the way, krill.
Krill oil. No.
So
Is it from the fish?
you know the little fish that whales eat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Krill oil for omega-3s. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I take that. I take, of course, a multivitamin.
Yeah.
I take creatine. I take collagen. And I take, is it riboflavin or riboflavin? But I take that also because it's supposed to support heart health. And, B. I take a lot of vitamin B.
Vitamin B, yeah.
Yeah. And L-carnitine.
Yep.
That's my list of whatever the shake that I make in the morning, the protein shake, whatever that has, I take as well.
What kind of, do you use whey protein or what is your protein of choice?
I try to stay away from whey.
Okay.
I use soy protein.
Yeah.
Or pea protein.
Yeah.
Whey just because the casein in the milk isn't supposed to be good
and
for.
many people
Prior to or after having heart issues, you should stay away from casein. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's easy enough to get pea protein or soy protein that you don't have to resort to whey protein.
Do you have any cheat days? Do you have any kind of...
comfort food?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
What is your...
Pizza.
Pizza. Oh, what about pineapple in a pizza?
Never. Never.
Actually, I was with Federica, Andrea, with all the love. I was actually eating with them in Italian restaurant, and I ordered prosciutto con piña. So I ordered pizza with pineapple, because in Finland, that's the thing. Everybody loves it. And they were like, they almost walk away. I said, no, this is not a personal stuff. I just love this. But, okay, what is your favorite pizza?
I stay away. Well, certainly not prosciutto.
No, exactly, because
not.
it's a ham and pineapple.
It has to be a vegetarian.
Yep.
I mean, I'll ask for a margarita, which is just the basil and the mozzarella, and maybe some mushrooms on it, or artichokes.
Nice.
Artichoke hearts, but that's as far as I'll go.
Good. How many times in a month do you have a pizza?
Oh, I thought you were going to say in a week.
Oh, do you do it weekly?
Just about every week.
Usually, because you have like a one day a week, you have like your, not cheat day, but you can eat.
Okay, so when I leave here, I'm going to have pizza.
Okay.
There's a sourdough pizza place in, the train station in Malaga?
Yeah.
Vialia, upstairs. There's and that's what I'm going to do. I mean, just thinking
they have
about
maybe the out terrace also in that rest. I'm not sure, because I think I've been there maybe, but I didn't eat pizza. I had a small beer. Oof. What about me? What about any sweets? Did you eat any sweets? No sugar?
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate. What is dark chocolate in your mind? Like over 80%?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Cacao.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really healthy for you. I used to have like raw cocoa, like cocoa powder with warm water and just sip it like
Really?
This. Yeah, because I was like, it's just so healthy. But now if I want, I eat like really good dark chocolate. Because
80 or
this is
85%.
Like
My wife got me into that.
What about fruits? You eat a lot of fruits?
Recently I do eat a lot of fruit, but recently I've been on a watermelon kick.
They are so good now.
Because it seems to be watermelon and pineapple, as a matter of fact.
And I love mangoes now when they're in the season, they're nice and ripe. That's my treat. Every day I'm waiting, like after my stretching, before I go to sleep, I eat one mango and I watch TV, and I am by myself in my house, and I eat the mango and I was like, ooh, this is so good. I'm talking by myself because
Do you know how to professionally peel a mango?
Actually, I do it with I put it like this, and then I put circles, and then I have a glass, and I take the small pieces, and I saw it in some kind of YouTube video or something. I don't know if that's the professional way, but...
Well, I just cut it in half and then cut it this way, and then just peel off.
Oh, yeah.
Peel off the skin in 4 proportions. Yeah.
Today I learned something. Amazing. All right. I think for today, we can wrap this up, and I truly appreciate for you coming. And I think maybe in the future we can do this again, because I think we could talk here through the night if needed.
Just let me know.
Absolutely. It was truly a pleasure.
And it was my honor.
Mr. William Mitchell, thank you for coming.
Miko, you're the best.
Guys, go train, keep smiling, and remember, Jiu-Jitsu never dies, baby.
Jiu-Jitsu never.
Boom. Woo.